So I don't like that I have all these frames nested in my component like this. I've given them names to try to help keep track of what's what in here, but it's still a bit hard for me to tell what's going on. So what I want to do is extract this title bar out into its own component. That will make all this code a little bit cleaner and easier to tell what's going on, and it will make it so I can reuse my title bar component inside of other components. So if I have a different palette or a window component that also needs a title bar, I can just reuse this one that I've already built instead of having to create a new one. So normally I would create a new file for each new component I want to create. For now, I'm just going to create my title bar component in this same file, just to make it easier to see how these two components will relate to each other. So since I'm putting this in the same file, and this file already imports my React and my Framer libraries, all I have to do is write a new function for my new component. I'll do that at the bottom here. So I'll create a function called title bar. And the JSX that I want to return is exactly what I have in my palette component. It's this frame for the title bar and then another frame inside it that makes the close button. So I can just cut and paste this JSX into my new component. And don't forget, I need a way to get data into this component, so I'll add a single argument called props. And now I have a separate component for my title bar. Notice it's not showing up in my palette any longer, so I need to add it back to my palette component. But since my title bar is now its own component, I can use it as a tag in my JSX just like any other component. I'll make it a self-closing tag since there's nothing that it needs to wrap. And now I'm basically back to where I was before, except now my code for my palette component is much smaller. And I think more importantly, it's easier to tell what's going on in my JSX because my title bar is listed by name now instead of just having a bunch of generic frames here. One other thing you might have noticed here is that this change broke the connection to my override for the title bar color. So I'm going to delete that for now, and we're going to look at a different way to pass data to a component and see how we can change that again. So if I look at one of these frame tags, we can see that we're specifying these different properties with this HTML-like syntax inside the tag itself. So how do all these properties that we add to the tag get into my component? Well, you guessed it, they come in through props. So all the properties in this tag get combined into one object. That object gets sent into the component function as the props object. So for example, if I want to send a new background color to my title bar component, I can just add it directly to the tag for title bar. And now this new value is getting sent to the title bar component through the props object. I don't see any change in my component yet because I still need to apply that property from my props object in my JSX somewhere. So if I just pass down props.backgroundColor to my title bar frame, then I'll be able to see the effect in my component. And right here, I'm setting the height of the title bar to 50, but I might want to be able to change that via props as well. And in fact, there could be a lot of things that I might or might not want to change through props. And it's pretty annoying to have to try to anticipate every possible thing that could get sent through the props object and then list them all out here on my JSX. So we can get around that problem by using something called the spread operator. The spread operator is just 3 dots placed in front of an object or an array. So in this case, I'm going to use it with my props object. So I put 3 dots before my props. What this does is it takes all the individual properties out of this object and it spreads them out into my tag. So I no longer have to anticipate all the things that could potentially be sent through this props object. I don't even have to know what they are. They just automatically get applied to this tag. It could be one property, it could be 100, it doesn't matter, I don't need to know. So I can even delete this background color and it will still get passed through props and then spread into this tag because I'm using the spread operator on props. So this is a really handy trick that I use in almost all of my components. But there's an important thing to note about this, and that is that the placement of this in the order of these properties can make a big difference. Because any properties that get spread out from this props object will overwrite anything that you've explicitly set before you do this. And also any property that I set after this props spread will overwrite the property coming in from props. Sort of confusing, but that's actually good. As long as we know that that's how that works, we can use it to our advantage. Like in my title bar, I want to be able to customize the height via props, but I also want to provide a default value in case nothing gets sent from props. So I can specify the height as 50 here, and since the props spread comes after that, if I want to set a different height via props, it will use that value instead of 50. It will overwrite this value that I've set here. So now all my title bars are 80 points high instead of 50 because I'm sending a custom value through props that's overwriting this height because it comes after it. Now width is something I don't want to be customizable through props. I always want the title bar to span the full width of its container, so I always want it to be set to 100%. But the way I have it now, it could be changed to something else if I send a different width through props. But the fix for that is easy. I just have to make sure that any properties I don't want to be changed through props get set after the spread. So now no matter what width gets sent through props, I will overwrite that value with 100%, so my title bar will always span the full width. And now if I want to change any properties in the title bar, I can just set them on the tag, and I don't have to worry about setting every one of those inside the component, because they'll automatically be spread out of my props object. So I can add a border to the title bar tag, and it automatically gets applied to the frame without me having to add it in the JSX of the title bar component. Now I said before that I should put this component in its own file. So let's do that now. I'll just create a new file called title bar. And again, I'm going to delete all the template code that Framer gives me. At the top, I need to import all of the React library, and I need to import the frame element from the Framer library, just like we did before. Then I can just cut and paste my function from the palette file into my title bar file, and I'm almost done. So now that I have this in a separate file, I need to remember to export this component so that it can be seen from other files. And then in order to use it in the file for my palette component, I need to import the title bar component here. The // here is just telling Framer to look for this file in the same place as the current file. So now I have two components, a palette and a title bar. And if I switch over to my components tab, I can see I even have my title bar here as a separate component that I can use outside of my palette. So we just learned how to use one component inside of another, and we learned that the properties that we set from a JSX tag get passed to our component through the props object.